complain. But there's one aspect of libertarianism that I think we need to dial down a little bit, and that is, I think we focus a little bit too much on the past. And so I wanted to give a talk, make a case, and see if I can get a few memes implanted, that the future isn't going to be anything like the past. So, for most of us, I mean, particularly people who come through the Randian approach, we get this, the Founding Fathers, and no question, a bunch of Stone Age geniuses. Of course, it was a bit of a top-hatted sausage fest, but that's okay, those were the times. But very smart guys who did the very best they could to design the very smallest government with the greatest amount of freedom that could be imagined at the time. Kind of didn't work. The very smallest government in history has now turned into the very largest government in history. I don't think that's accidental. I think that minarchism is food for cancer, because minarchism creates a small government which allows for the free market, which creates massive increases in wealth, which is collateral for the government to borrow and war and print and debt and bribe. And so I think the smallest governments always do end up creating the biggest governments. Smallest government before America, you could argue, was free trade. England became a massive empire. America, currently in the death throes of a massive empire. The Netherlands before that, you could sort of go on, but the smallest government is like pushing this big helium balloon into the water. It goes, whoosh, pops into the very largest governments. I sort of view government as cancer, and I like going to Dr. Anarchist, not Dr. Minarchist, because Dr. Minarchist is going to say, oh, you got a cancer, no problem. We can cut that out by about 80%, and say, well, we did that before, it kind of grew back. Can we not cut more? No, 80%, but don't worry, we're going to cut it down to 80%, and while we're in there, we're going to write on it, we're going to felt tip marker, it's real special, we're going to write on your cancer, the 20% that remains, don't grow. And we call that a constitution, and you'll be fine. Whereas Dr. Minarchist is, we're taking that thing out, 100%. Nothing left to regrow. But if we look at libertarianism and the way that libertarianism is communicated, particularly in America, and let's face it, America is the central clearinghouse for libertarian thought, people will say, well, we kind of want to get back to the Founding Fathers, we kind of want to get back to the Constitution, we kind of want to get back to the late 18th century, states' rights. And the problem is that it's not true, because you say, well, we want to go back to 1776. Well, okay, without the slavery, obviously. You know, we want the slavery. And we'd like to go back to 1776, but rights for women we think is a good idea. So let's throw some of those in. Rights for children, and you sort of go through the list of things that you want to change about 1776. And I think when you're done, it doesn't really look like 1776 anymore. So we want to go back, but we want to change so much that it's not back there anymore. It's someplace completely different. And I know that when you want to sell something new, there's this temptation to equate it to something that's been there already, right? So I made a film once, and you sort of, how do you sell the film? You know, well, it's Saving Private Ryan meets Beaches meets, you know, you've got to equate it to some other thing in order to get into the room. And there's that temptation when we talk about freedom, the non-aggression principle, property rights, we want to equate it to something else, to something that's out there that people can kind of understand, because then we don't have to make the hardest case, which is the moral case, which is the most inflammatory case, which is the do or die, make or break for our relationships case, which is the moral case. So people say, oh, you're an anarchist. You're an anarchist. What's that like? And I thought Butler Schaefer had a great statement about this. He said, it's kind of like where you are right now. No jails here, no cops, no taxes, no police. But we want to equate it to something that's been there before. So people say, well, how is a stateless society? Show me a stateless society that's worked in the past. But that's a completely ridiculous argument. Almost all societies had slavery prior to the 17th and 18th centuries, and the people say, well, you show me a society without slavery in the past. Just because you can doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It probably means it's a good thing. But people want us to equate it to something that they can sink their sort of hooks into it, and so they don't have to look at the moral argument of it's wrong to initiate force. So how many people have talked about medieval Iceland? Anyone? Yeah? Oh, it's sad, isn't it? This is what we're reduced to avoid making the moral case. Okay, I'll go look up the law in medieval Iceland and I'll get right back to you. Because what's more appealing to people as a place to move to in the future than medieval Iceland? I mean, not only is it old, not only is dentistry a horse with a rope, but it's cold! Or Middle Ages Ireland. Did anyone go? Yeah, you've been to Middle Ages Ireland. Now it's a drunken horse with a rope that's pulling your tooth out. Oh, the stereotypes. I was born there, I can do it. You can't. And so we try to equate, Somalia. Somalia. Oh, isn't that an anarchic paradise? Because when a state collapses, that's exactly the same as people understanding why. You know, like if a bunch of churches fall down, you immediately get a philosophical understanding of atheism. Something fell down. That's all that you can say about Somalia. So, let's give you a thought experiment about what it is I'm trying to get at as I circle my topic like a shark. That's not very hungry. Slavery is an easy one because we all understand how immoral it is and so on. But the analogy to when people come and say, how are the roads going to be done, and how national defense, and this and that and the other, the analogy to it, which I think is powerful to sort of grasp and understand, is it's like we're abolitionists in the 18th century, the 17th century. We say, slavery is wrong. And people say, but who's going to pick the cotton when there are no slaves? We all understand that that's a ridiculous question. We can see that because we're on the other side of that, right? But who's going to pick the cotton if there are no slaves? Who can... We'll get into serfdom and feudalism, modern feudalism later. Yeah, Mexico. We will subsidize our farmers to dump their products on the Mexican farmers, driving them out of business, so they have to turn to the drug war, and then we'll bomb those crops too. And call that progress. Now, if you were to say in the 17th century, picture this, right? So, I mean, this is going to reveal my ignorance of cotton farming, so if I get the technicals wrong, forgive me. So you say, slavery is immoral. Got to get rid of slavery. It's no good. People say, well, who is going to pick the cotton when there are no slaves? And you say, you know what? This is what's going to happen. There'll be these giant horseless carriages that run off crushed dinosaur juice from thousands of miles away. Wait, stay with me. It's not crazy. And they will go through the cotton fields, and these robot hands will pick all the cotton, and it'll shit shirts out the back. Okay, I made up the last bit. But crushed dinosaur juice has got to sound crazy enough to people, right? And people would say, that's not an answer. You're just making shit up. I'm a libertarian. But that is a true answer, right? You've got these giant machines that go through these fields, and you could never have predicted that. How could you conceivably have predicted that in the 18th century, that that's how the problem of cotton picking, how the cotton picking problem is going to... You knew it. You were doing it in your head, weren't you? I just thought I'd echo that. But that's the same thing, right? I mean, you could easily say, how are the roads going to be solved in the future? Well, we'll teleport. I mean, is that any less than dinosaur juice munching, shitting giant combine harvesters picking? I mean, it's the same, like, we don't know what kind of solutions are going to be out there because the combined genius of 6 billion people trying to solve problems without guns preventing them from doing so is a force that it dwarfs the sun, it pales the sun, its incandescence can't be conceived of. We've only seen glimmers of it here and there where freedom is allowed in the human race.